So West Asia, we have cultural ties, we have deep historical ties. The cultural interactions between Middle East and the landmass which is now called India is happening from the century old days, and that has transformed not only India but also many other things in Middle East. So in future, we all see that West Asia would be, because of its geography, you have Mover and Shaker in the region. There are several places within West Asia as well, which will define which way this IMEC will move forward. To build the conversation, may I request Faiz Saib, he is Deputy Chief of Mission, Embassy of Israel here in Delhi. Ambassador Amar Sinha is joining us online. He is in Germany right now. And Professor Gulshan Sachdeva, Chief Coordinator, Dakshin Global South Center of Excellence at RIS. And may I also request Ambassador S.K. Verma, his Chairman RIS, to also join us on the stage. Thank you, thank you. Sachdeva ji, mic is now yours.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. In fact, I didn't know about the last minute change, but I'm really glad that Ambassador Verma has joined us. I'm really honored and privileged to really moderate this particular session. You know, we had, in the first session, we discussed about India, what India is doing, what India's ambitions are in this particular area. The last session was very exciting about Europe, how Europe is looking at IMEC, and now we are in the Middle East, West Asia. Now, you know, this is a bit of a complicated region, as we all know. You know, in fact, I've been following this, all these different corridors for the last 25, 30 years now. And any development corridor, any economic corridor, we all know that there are very serious developmental implications and also geopolitical complications. Now here in this particular region, there are many complexities. We saw just immediately after the announcement of this particular corridor what happened in Middle East. So now the point really we are looking at it, whether the complexities of geopolitics within West Asia will basically affect all our ambitions, this whole transformative corridor which we have been talking, or it could be other way around, means all those economic opportunities which we have been talking, which we'll be talking till evening, they will basically affect many of those complexities within this region. And you know, I'm representing here the Global South Center of Excellence at RIS, and you know, in the beginning, our DG, Professor Sachin Chaturvedi, talked about you know, IMEC network of think tanks. And at the Global South Center of Excellence, we also have our own network with all the Global South think tanks, where we have now more than 142 think tanks which we are working in 86 countries. And it's also very interesting that in most of our conversations, many of those think tanks are also very much interested in different kind of economic corridors, and also particularly in IMEC. So, you know, it's not just only people, those who are directly affected with this IMEC, but also a larger part of the Global South is also very much interested in this corridor. So, you know, today in this panel, we have now Ambassador Sanjay Kumar Verma, and then we also have Ambassador Amar Sinha, who was our former ambassador in Tajikistan and also in Afghanistan. and also was a former secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs, looking after economic affairs. And then we have the now we also have Mr. Fares Saeed, who is Deputy Chief of the Mission at the Embassy of Israel in India, who has been instrumental in bringing our two countries together. Since the time is very short, so what I'll really do is I'll just ask specifically one or two questions from all our panelists to kind of reflect, and then if there is time, we can just go further on this. So may I start with you, Ambassador Verma? In fact, the two particular points which you would like to reflect. One is knowing, as I mentioned, the complexities, difficulties, and also certain missing links of infrastructure within the West Asian region. How much hopeful you are that we will be able to achieve many of the things which we have been talking in the foreseeable future. And the second point is that, in many of these conversations we are seeing, there are different corridors. I'm not just talking about the Chinese BRI, but you also have from the Europe, have all this global network, gateway network. And of course, we have also been very much part of the INSTC, and then many, many others. In fact, every country in this region is part of, one network individually or their own strategies. In the long run, how do you really see them? Somewhere competing with each other or really complementing with each other? Because ultimately it's economics. If all of them, they work because the global growth is happening, trade is happening, how do we really look into all these things, and particularly in the context of West Asia, because this is what. So maybe I'll start with you, sir.
Thank you very much for posing this question. When I look at the infrastructure is not an end by itself. Infrastructure creates many more opportunities in energy, in science and technology, in cultural mingling, in societal economics, in community living, in manufacturing, digital transformation. So when I look at infrastructure, I look at all these sectors together. Today, where we are, and tomorrow where will we be, certainly there will be a huge delta increase in our own pathway, and many of the objectives which we have highlighted for IMEC will be reached and achieved. Now, various different corridors and competition should always be there. But at the same time, they should also be able to complement. So there would be some redundancy amongst these corridors, but there would also be some complementarities. There is not cut and dry kind of a response to this. And we should, in fact, promote more competition so that we are able to achieve more efficient processes in a shorter period of time. Skilling is an important area. We create infrastructure. If there are not capable people to handle them, the infrastructure will fall. And therefore, in order to have an efficacy, skilling is an important sector, and we should look at that. Before we go for the physical infrastructure, partly it is already existing in the region. They need to be connected with each other. We should always look at the processes which will need to be connected as well. And in order to connect the processes, whether it is customs facilitation, whether it is loading, offloading, whether it is connecting one ship with the transshipment of the other ship, all these things can easily be connected using the digital platforms. We have in India a good skill set on developing such digital platforms, not only financial, which we already have, but also on the logistical side. And therefore, we should be able to push India's own contribution into this corridor and the region itself, not only West Asia, even further, in order to see the fructification of the IMEC as it has been thought about. Energy would remain an important sector. Sometimes energy is a part of infrastructure, sometimes it is not. Sometimes it's just the trade. So both on the infrastructure side and the trade, it will remain important. In West Asia, look at the health services and medical facilities. Hospitals will become infrastructure, but the services, medical services, health services, pharmaceuticals will provide an impetus to the trade, which is already happening, and probably move it forward from there. So I will look at infrastructure as an overall ecosystem rather than physical infrastructure by itself. So physical, digital, soft, community, and societal.
Thank you, Ambassador Verma. In fact, I'm sorry I didn't introduce Ambassador Verma. He's current chairman of RIS and also serving senior most secretary within the Ministry of External Affairs. He was also our former ambassador in Japan and also in Canada and also in, I think, Sudan and many other countries. He served there. Thank you, sir. And may I come to you, Mr. Farah Saeed. So the question which I posed to Ambassador Verma, if you would like to reflect on some of those points and also bring specific things that will the spirit of Abraham Accords will continue with all what has happened in the last after terrorist attacks and following that, and how do you really see and situate your country within this changing geopolitical scenario and all the different opportunities which are coming?
Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for this question. I think that Israel has one of the widest perspectives on IMEC. We see IMEC as a very important, as a key role factor in our relation and connection with India, of course, with all the strategic economic ties that we have and the deep ties that become much more important for us, and I believe also for India in the last few years. We see it in the perspective of our relation with the EU, with all the challenges and with all the potential that we have. We see ourselves as not only part of West Asia, but also part of Europe, as a historical and future connection between the two continents. Of course, our relation with the United States. And the most important point, what you mentioned, is Abraham Accord and putting more efforts into Abraham Accords and into stability and peace in the region. Of course, the first frame that we thought about IMEC is a future normalization with more Muslim and Arab countries, especially in West Asia, and of course, especially we are talking about the Saudis that play a major role in this project. When you look at the declaration at the MOU that was signed during the G20 in 2023 and the declaration between President Trump and Prime Minister Modi that both embraced the IMEC and want to invest more in it, the two countries that are not part of this agreement yet are Jordan and Israel, even though the Jordan and Israel plays a very important role in all IMEC discussions and all IMEC future projects. And I think that this is the main thing that we need to aim to, is to Israel and Jordan be officially part of IMEC. We see it as a huge contributor to stability in the region, especially now that the Middle East is reshaping itself in the last year and a half. After the October 7 attack, many partners understood that one of the main things to stabilize the region is de-radicalization. This is what the Saudis understand, this is what all moderate Arab and Muslim countries understand, and Israel plays a very important role. We see what's happening now in Syria, what's happening now in Lebanon. To the region to flourish, this project must become reality. There is parts that are already working on. The India GCC part has already been pretty much advanced. The part between Israel and Europe, it works. You have a Haifa port and Ashdod port. Haifa port is one of the most efficient ports in the world, and the EU actually is one of our most important trade partners, so this part works. But for the land part between the Emirates and Israel to become reality, all stakeholders need to play a positive role into pushing into this normalization. And of course, we put a lot of trust in the United States and in India on making this happen. We see India playing a much more important, much more major role on this. We really hope to see this happening as soon as possible. Regarding the current atmosphere, I think that everybody understands that economic growth plays a very important role in regional stability and in global stability. And we want to be part of it, and we really hope that the current dynamic will lead us there.
Thank you, Mr. Saib. I think you made a very important point. One is that, as the concept of IMEC is evolving, we do need to involve more countries. In fact, Sachit Chaturvedi in the morning mentioned about Oman and others, and that always happened. If you look back to the history of INSTC, it started with India, Russia, and Iran, and then many more countries joined on the way and still continue to join. And I think that perhaps would also happen in the case of IMEC as well. Now, may I now come back to, come to Ambassador Amar Sinha. The points which we have been discussing, you can reflect on those points. And, we worked, both of us, in Afghanistan, and when you were in Afghanistan, I was in Afghanistan, we looked at the things very positively, when we were very much part of, linking Afghanistan, Central Asia, South Asia, this whole the new Silk Road strategy. So the many things were in place, but still then suddenly things change. And, everybody was on board. We thought that things are going in very, very, right direction. So, but this is what the nature of these corridors, the business is. So maybe you can also bring some of those points, from your experience in Afghanistan and also on these broader issues. Ambassador Sinha.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Thank
now we
you
can
very
hear
much.
you, son. Yeah.
Well, good morning from Berlin. A number of issues. Of course, what I'll do is I'll respond to some of the issues that you have raised and also make a few points which I have thought are germane to this discussion. One, of course, is from our perspective, this is really a transformative and a visionary idea. And I say this because by the sort of complexity of geography and geopolitics, India has become landlocked in a sense that our east, west, and north land access to any other geography looks very difficult for the moment. So this obviously makes us, it is a necessity that we start looking at the maritime domain much more carefully and closely. And it is not something, a new idea. In fact, many of our corridors that we are involved with, and you mentioned INSTC, even the Chabahar port, in fact, all these, the first leg depends on the maritime sector. And I think that is why our connections with the IMEC is critical. IMEC, as you know, has two corridors, the eastern corridor, which links India to the Middle East, and of course the northern corridor, which takes you from Middle East right up to Europe through the Haifa port. Much has been said about the northern corridor. I will only make one point, that because we have to, from India's perspective, we have to look at the entire corridor in totality, because the eastern corridor, which has its own standalone logic and very compelling logic, can be achieved both bilaterally. But we have to look at in the longer term and look at the entire corridor. So they're the only, my own experience of the region tells me that when corridors begin or transit through contested territories and territories that are disturbed, it does not lead to great outcomes. So thus, when we plan, we have to have that agility and flexibility to look at different options, both in terms of the termination points and the transit points. The Eastern Corridor, of course, is much more clear-cut for us. Second, while we discussed here the European segment, and I do see that Europe perhaps is in need for a modern-day Vasco da Gama or Christopher Columbus once again, because they had discovered a lot of these corridors, but they seem to have gone into a cocoon. But I think the transatlantic developments and even the Russia-Ukraine war is dictating that they start looking afresh at at new options, alternatives, and also redundancy. And I tell you, in connectivity, redundancy is never too costly and it never hurts. And that is how the corridors work. And of course, any corridor that we think of, we have to visualize it as perhaps a river system, where as it progresses, different tributaries and distributaries join and exit. And that is what leads to a comprehensive economic development. So this has to be an open-ended sort of a corridor. There are many global impulses which is pushing this. Of course, the need both of Europe to find new markets, to access new places, but even from India's perspective, looking at our demographics, our increasing capabilities, where we look ourselves in the near future as manufacturing hub, etc. These are absolutely essential investments that we need to start now. And of course, let me just focus on the Eastern corridor, where I think one idea which has not been very discussed, and this had actually, the Prime Minister had suggested this even before this idea of IMEC had come about, was grid interconnectivity with the Middle East under that one sun, one world and one grid concept, which of course initially sounded very counterintuitive and impractical, that how do you bring electricity through undersea cables? But now, living in Europe for some time now, I realize that this is not a new concept and the technology is fairly well proven. And UK has actually already over 6 such projects connecting to Norway, Scotland to Ireland, and actually in Germany, they started the first underwater electricity cable in 1811. That's 200 years ago. So the technology is tested, except that the costs are very high right now. But as we have seen with undersea communication cables, where the costs have dropped to $30,000 per kilometer, I'm sure the costs here will come down as the market grows. And that brings me to the fact that while India and West Europe have been mutual guarantors of both food and energy security for each other, I think that as we do energy transition, the salience of Middle East and the Gulf will remain because of the geography, so a lot of solar power can be generated. And second, I was looking, and you look at the molecules of hydrocarbons, it has both the carbon and the hydrogen aspects. So it will depend on which you value more and which you utilize. And as somebody had mentioned, that Europe needs to get enthused. I could sense, I was traveling recently to Greece, etc. I could sense that the Mediterranean littoral states, there's a great deal of excitement, both in Greece and Italy. But the rest of Europe has still not perhaps realized that they really need to seriously look at different options and start thinking of connectivity for their own future. And I can visualize, India's, given our own demographics, that goods and our prowess reaching Europe at an affordable cost through Middle East, which already has a sizable Indian diaspora presence, close to $9 million. We are very closely interlinked. In fact, if you look at the trade figures, I think Saudi Arabia and UAE come at number 3 and number 4 as our trading partners. So we have to, we have a huge opportunity. And I think that what we also need to start doing today is start creating timelines and concrete action plans which we need to follow up. And of course, that is where such conclaves help a lot. Thank you very much, and I'll be happy to answer questions if you have.
Thank you, Ambassador Sinha. In fact, we just have about 2 or 3 more minutes with us. So maybe, in fact, I'll come back to, all 3 panelists at least for one minute or so. Ambassador Sinha mentioned about concrete plans. So I would think of actually 2 things which are really crucial for any corridor to kind of succeed. One is, do we need to have certain institutional structure? I'm not talking about the big secretariat or something, but something we have to create, because then you keep working on the idea. And the second, even the most crucial part, which I have seen in my earlier projects also, who is really going to finance? You know, the missing links, I mean, you know, there are many studies which are telling about 400 to 500 billion dollars kind of thing which are required for this. So far, I think the Saudis have committed about 20 billion or so. And in fact, you know, many other earlier projects we have seen, I mean, if you look at even TAPI project, I mean, you know, despite all the problems in this region, all the agreements, everything was in place, but, you know, there was nobody there behind to really put money behind that project. So how do we really look at, you know, unless there are serious finances there and the institutional structure, I mean, these would be very, I think, useful in the long run, because if we keep saying that we'll mobilize from the private sector, mobilize from the multilateral organization, that's good to say, but, you know, we need to do something more. And I think all the countries we need to look at, because at least they have to commit for the parts which is running through their own countries. And perhaps, I don't know, because this is where perhaps you can just look at this.
On the institutional side, we can probably start with a soft secretariat, which basically means all the countries who are interested in this project could sign intergovernmental agreements, and each country takes its own turn to lead a soft secretariat rather than having a hard secretariat somewhere. On the financing side, we'll have to look at various options available, blended finance, BOT kind of a situation, BOT. We could look at sovereign funds availability. We could look at the multilateral lending opportunities. So all these things will have to be considered. It cannot be one or the other. It will have to be all of them.
Mr. Saib, on both the institutional and the finances part, where Israel looks at it and how it is. I mean, of course, you have to be part of that. That's very important, but beyond that.
Well, such a project need to involve all the main players. Eventually, when you look at it, most of the infrastructure is already being built or working on building it. If we want to recognize the main challenge that we have within this infrastructure financing, is the part that goes through Jordan. In Israel, most of the infrastructure, it's easy to handle and to adapt to new technologies, new trains, new transportations. Saudi Arabia, of course, it's working very hard on building infrastructure and trains that connect them to the Indian Ocean. And the only part that is actually missing is who will finance and who will assist Jordan in building the, I think, 200 kilometers within the Jordanian territory. And in this case, it's all those who will benefit the most from this project. And when you look at it, it's the European Union, it's the OECD countries, it's India, and of course Israel as well. The United States want to be invested in this project. Eventually, building such a huge infrastructure project will create so much workplaces, so much. It will involve so many companies from the private sector and from the government sector that everybody would like and would want to be part of it. I think that the first step that should happen is a feasibility study that will check how things will be in the ground, and from that point we can start recruiting those players.
Thank you. Ambassador Sinha, any quick points, any thoughts on this? Very briefly.
You see, in terms of financing, I wouldn't be too despondent. In fact, some of the richest countries are members of this project. And if they start talking of finances, I think then we are really looking at a bad thing. But also remember that when this project was unveiled, it was co-chaired by both President Biden and Prime Minister Modi. And that was called, it was a joint meeting. And there's also something what is called the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investments of the US. It's an initiative which they have launched to build different corridors, more as counterbalancing the BRI. So there are possibilities, all the big nations are involved. So obviously we will have to create bankable projects. And the TAPI, the real problem was what I mentioned, that when such corridors pass through insecure geographies, you have difficulty in getting finances. But I don't think at least the eastern corridor part has any such difficulty, and we should be able to start operationalizing it. And once the benefits start flowing out of this, I think then more people get on board. So you have to really create a success story and a nucleus, so to attract more investments.
Thank you, Ambassador Sinha. So we have to create certain success stories here. As in fact what we just learned in the last 20, 25 minutes or so, that certain parts of this corridor from India to UAE, from Israel to Europe, things are at least it's working. But then there are certain complications, both political, geopolitical, and also we need to have certain missing links, within West Asia. But things are moving in the positive direction in Middle East as well. We are talking about ceasefires, we are talking about Iranians are talking to Americans, and many other things are happening. And there are also positive things happening at the Ukraine front at the moment. So what we have now is we have learned this is a transformative project. Everybody has to get in, and we have to have certain success stories, and we have to have perhaps some soft secretariat, and then also commit certain finances, and some of the richest countries in the world are committed to this project. So hopefully we'll be having very good success stories in the years to come. But of course these are long-term projects. It will take time, but I think the project is back in the agenda after, at least for the last couple of months, one is hearing more and more about IMEC, and that's a good thing as far as this project is concerned. Thank you very much, and thank you for everyone.
Mr. Chair,
for participating.
just one last word I want to add.
Yeah, please.
More than a secretariat, I would feel that each of the nations need to have a designated point person and empowered groups which start looking at concrete issues that would need to be sorted out. And that would be a big start. And I believe that some countries have now special representatives, but it's not like just a special envoy, but really one point contact in each nation on all IMEC ideas.
Thank you. Your point well taken. Every country must have some point person or envoy or any particular sector. Thank you very much. But I think we have very useful, concrete ideas from this project, from this particular session. Thank you. And
Thank you, Gulshan ji. Thank you very much. Just a customary photograph. May I request come forward and help us in felicitation. It was really great conversation. We really thank Ambassador Sinha, who has joined us from Germany, Mr. Verma, Ambassador Verma. Then we also had with us Gulshan Sachdeva ji, and Saib, Faraz Saib, Deputy Chief of Mission, Embassy of Israel. Israel is a great component of IMEC and has already started working on it. Thank you, Saib, that you have taken the time out.